Hey everyone, my name is Colin, and today I'll be walking you through a tutorial on how to make Gif Collage style art. If you want to see examples of this art style, you can head to my blog where I have a tag for everything I post, or just watch this video through to the end. Link to the blog is in the description. I post all my art to tumblr.com because it's the only social media website I've found that can reasonably host moving images, and I've had an account there since 2010, so there's also a bit of momentum there. I'm not going to be talking about my history with the medium today, just hopefully give an overview of my process so anyone interested can try a fun way of expressing themselves and making things people tag with the word eye strain. So without further ado, let's go into Photoshop and get started. So as I mentioned, I use tumblr.com to host my GIFs. Again, they don't really work well on other social media sites I've found, or I haven't found the way. If at all during this process you know a better way or think of a better way, feel free to sound off in the comments and teach me something, because I'm self-taught and this will hopefully kind of create a dialogue both directions. So tumblr.com, the image dimensions are really important, because if your image is smaller or larger than the maximum image dimensions in the feed, it's going to compress and it will look a little off. So the image should be 540 pixels wide by 810 pixels tall. You can make it exactly in that dimension, just to kind of keep it simple, or you can do what I do and use like a funny number for the width. So let's make a new image and we're going to say 540, because I do like it being as wide as possible, because that's still not a ton of room. And I like to do something like 666 for the height. You know, something that's just going to be a fun little secret just for me. Now, the resolution, I've always just used the standard 72 pixels per inch. I know actual artists, or different artists, I should say, especially illustrators, tend to go a lot higher on that. I've never found that I've needed to go there. I also don't really know why I would. Not to say that it's wrong, I just haven't really explored that. So you can get away with just leaving that default and not worrying about it too much. So here we have our blank canvas. And when it comes to these GIF style art, the main thing we're going to be playing with is layers. You've got your layers window over here. I also apologize, I have an ultra wide monitor, so hopefully this will show up at whatever resolution you're watching this on over here. So the way Photoshop works is when you create a new file, you set its dimensions, it opens up blank, and you've got this nice window over here. The really relevant things are this layers tab, which is going to show we only have a background for now. And you can kind of ignore these for this basic tutorial. The main one you'll need to know is this right here, which creates a new layer. And it's just a completely blank layer right now. If I hide the background layer, you'll see it's kind of this checkerboard pattern. That means it's transparent. So if I were to just draw on it, nothing would show up behind it because it's transparent. And if I put the background on, it's harder to tell because it's white, but it's in there. So you can right click and delete a layer if you don't want it there anymore. The other option is, at least on a PC, you can hold Control and click J, and that will create a new layer or duplicate an existing layer. So let's say I have something on this layer, a smiley face. I can press Control J and it'll copy that layer. So these are all really relevant buttons I press a lot. So new layer, copy layer. These other ones, you can do some fun stuff in here, but that's a story for another time. So you also have your tools over here. We're not going to be doing too many crazy things either with this. You have your cursor, which allows you to move things that you select. You have your rectangular selection tool. You have a lasso that lets you draw more controlled selection. And then you have some magic wand tools, and play around with those. Eraser. This paint bucket, if you right click it, you can turn it to gradient tool. I use this a ton, and I'll get to that later, but that's basically it. And then down here is your color palette. It starts in default black and white, but you can click it and make it any color you want, or you can use the dropper to pick a color out of an image. So for a collage, like I mentioned, we're going with layers. So I went on Wikipedia and I grabbed some public domain images to use for this. With a collage, it's transformative. A lot of mine, I use things that are probably copyrighted or, someone else's art. But hopefully through the process of using them in collage, you're kind of destroying or transforming the image enough that it doesn't look like you're just stealing someone else's art as your own. It's inspiring you. I mean, again, I am not speaking as an expert on collage. This is a hobby. I like the outcomes of it, and it can almost be like journaling where you get to put a bunch of images you like together. But for this demonstration, I'm just going to be using things that are squarely in the public domain just because it's just less complicated than that sort of gray area of making transformative changes to art. So I have this image that I grabbed of different oceanic zones with all these little creatures in it. There's a lot of fun words in here. It's got some different colors. It's a little like kind of desaturated. It's a little gray, so we'll see what we do with that. So I'm just gonna pop this in. I use Control C and Control V to copy paste. It's not gonna fit perfectly, but that's fine. I'm just gonna kind of drop it in where I want it. And then I grabbed this image of off of Wikipedia as well. This is a Latin depiction of teachers because I thought, I'm teaching, so let's put that in there. And yeah, we'll just slide it in somewhere. And then you can also do some cheeky stuff like this image of the Tumblr Help Center that I snipped out. Drop that in as well. And then why not use that little note I wrote of what I was going to say at the top of this video. So we'll put all these in, and this is just a start so far. You don't need a lot of images, and you can kind of start small on this. So let's just start here, and let's just change the background color just for fun. So let's do, let's just do like a dark blue. And then we're going to open this. And what I like to do is just make a new layer copy of it and then hide the original. And that way I can really mess with this and transform it. And I'll still have the original to go back to if I want. So a couple things that you can do is Control T or Edit Transform, Free Transform, apparently. Control T will show you the dimensions of the image, and you can kind of like resize it to fit or rotate it or whatever it is you want to do. If you're trying to adjust it to scale, there's this little chain link here, which is kind of nice. It just keeps it perfectly locked in the dimensions that it had originally. So if I wanted to be, fit this as best as it can without being stretched in any way, I can always do that. And so I'm sure there's another way to do this. Whenever I'm done transforming, I always just click this cursor icon and then I hit apply the transformation. So we have this. So again, I'm just going to make layers. I make tons of layers. And if you mess up, you can always just delete when you do that. So I'm going to make a layer here, and I am going to show you a couple things here. So over here in the layers, you have this drop down, right? It starts at normal. And this just means this layer is just being displayed like normal. But there's all of these other words here. Dissolve, darken, multiply, color burn, etc., etc. And these are grouped by type. I don't exactly know how it is, but what you can do is you can just scroll, and you can see as I'm going through these different layer types, I get a different kind of almost translucence based on what type of layer. So when I set it to hue, it's only copying down the hue of this layer, and it creates this really cool kind of like inverted highlighter effect. And I'm going to show you another technique right now. I've created a new layer, and up here I'm going to go to image and apply image. And what that's going to do is take everything that's visible on the canvas, and if I hit OK, it's going to make it so that image is now a normal layer. Like everything that was visible has been copied as a flattened image. So this isn't multiple layers. It just looks like the layers that were underneath it. And you can use this to kind of create layered effects or continue to mess with an image without having it be layered on top of each other. I don't know if that makes sense. But then what I can do is I can hide this hue layer that I just made and maybe put the normal layer, and then this applied image, I can drop it down and choose something like, I don't know. Let's say linear dodge. And I'm realizing the one I unhid was the original. Although I kind of liked how that looked of these like ghost image, this resize of it. So yeah, let's just start with that. So that's kind of what you can do to create these sort of distortions and layers. Like I've made this little glitchy effect, and all I really did was copy a layer, resize it, change its layer type, and then apply image, change that layer type, and there you go. You have something kind of visually interesting going on here. There's another thing you can do, which is fun. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to apply image. So everything you see now is being applied. And here's another thing I use all the time, which is the filters. So up here in filter, a filter applies only to the layer that you have selected. So I have this new layer 6 that I have selected. I'm going to go into filters, and I'm going to, the two most common things I use are sharpen and blur. And blur just does what it does. Now, I like to use the Gaussian blur instead of just regular blur. You get to set the tone. Anyone who's nearsighted, this is going to look really familiar. And a Gaussian blur of like 2 or 3 pixels is going to get you a nice blur effect like that. And you can see from the preview, I didn't actually hit OK there. I just want to show off. Sharpen is just going to do what it says. You can press sharpen, and you can see all the edges just kind of start to pop. And if you press Control F, it applies the last layer you, like whatever filter you just put on, it will just redo that filter. So sometimes I like to do a sharpen, and then I just mash it a couple times until I get this really messed up pixely look where all the edges start to kind of bleed and get low res like this. And again, we're just gonna make something like this. So this is like neon and grungy and all messed up. And you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna make another apply image, and then I'm going to hide the ones I currently have, and then maybe set something like this. So now if we look at the difference between just the basic and the one I have, there's like this, and then you can even do sort of fun things, see how they layer on top of each other by dragging over. And you can also play with the opacity. So I like this red effect, but I want it to be a little weaker. So I'm actually going to just nudge this down to like 35, and you can see it adds a nice little bit of color and depth to it. So we have this as our background. Now let's just play with some more layers. So we have this image of our teacher, and we're gonna do the same thing we did before. We're gonna copy the layer, and we're just gonna play with filters, just rolling that mouse wheel up and down and trying to find one that we think looks sort of interesting. This is kind of an interesting effect, right? This weird inverted difference, but we can also do something like this overlay. And sometimes the layer types will look very similar between each other at 100% opacity, but will behave differently as you lower the opacity. So sometimes it can also help to go to like 50% opacity and just roll it over. So I like this overlay, and I'm going to just put it down to like 20%. Just make it barely in there. And then maybe I'll copy this layer and bring it back up. And then I might do something like put a filter on it. So here's another filter you can use. This one creates sort of an interesting color phenomenon. So find edges, that's under stylize, and it makes the edges look like this. I mean, it's kind of not the best looking on its own, in my opinion, but it makes the edges sort of bubbly and cartoony. And we can just put this like really, really low, like really subtle. Sometimes things go down to like 5% opacity so that they're just barely there. And that's basically how you do the basic part of a collage. You just take layers, mess them around, multiple images, play with putting them on top of each other, play with putting different filter types and layer types over each other. Just really have fun with it. There's no wrong way to do it as long as you like the outcome, and it can be kind of therapeutic just messing with images and putting them together. There are some principles you maybe want to keep in mind, like just trying to have like a good visual flow or focal points or light, but maybe I'm not the best teacher for that right now. So we can just take all the things we wanted to put in this, and we're just gonna just put them in there. And I'm just gonna resize this so it kind of fits in here. So I'm just using all those techniques, transform, layer type. I mean, that's really all that I do. And then here's another fun thing. You can, I don't want this Tumblr Help Center thing being legible in this. So I'm going to go to Filter, Pixelate, Mosaic. And this lets you create like a fun mosaic effect. So we recommend, and then I'm going to just stay within that limit. And if you don't like something, oh my God, Control Alt Z. Oh, you know what? My stupid overlay is screwing with me. Alt Control Z will take you backwards. But for some reason, my super gaming computer wants to screw with me. So we're just using Control F to reapply this. Scaled. If you click, you will be taken. Okay, sorry. I'm just having fun. I mean, there, look, that's sort of weird looking, right? And then, I don't know, maybe I'll sharpen it a bit just to make it look extra weird and pixely. Okay, and then I also had this in here. So this is going to be kind of a similar thing. And there's not a lot of color going on. 3 of the images I layered are colorless or just kind of grayscale. That's okay. So I'm going to just put this in here, and I'm going to maybe do like a really light Gaussian blur. Again, we're making images that hurt people's eyes. Okay, so we have our collage. Now we're going to do 2 things. We're going to create a light source, and we're going to create some static. So first, I guess I'll do the static. So this is a technique I use to make static. Is I make a new image that's just big. That's 4,000 by 4,000. And then I take the paint bucket and I drop it onto the image. And I set the layer to dissolve. And I make it 50% opacity. So now I have 50% black and 50% white in a dissolved pattern together. And I'm going to merge those layers together by selecting them both and right-clicking and selecting merge. And then I'm going to copy and I'm going to put over here. And now I have static that I can move around however I like. But, that looks cool, but it's going to take over. So this is another I guess slightly advanced technique, but it's worth showing, is that gradient tool I mentioned. You can use a gradient with a transparency. So under here, there's all these basic options. There's black and white, black and transparent. These are the two colors that you have selected. I have black and white. And then there's all these like wacky, wild color schemes. So I'm going to take the black and transparent, and I want the image to have be lighter at the top. So what I'm going to do is set it to be black like this. And look, now it's black down there. But what I really want it to do is be staticky. So I'm going to have this static layer above my black gradient, right click it, and I'm going to create a clipping mask. And that is going to put the static layer so that it only exists where this layer is. So if this layer is hidden, you don't see it. If I move the static, it's only moving within the confines of that black gradient. And that's what allows you to get this nice gradient on the static. And, you know, maybe it's a little too high. So I'm going to bring it down like that, just dragging it down. And then it's a little too white and black, like it's a little too obvious. So I'm going to actually make it soft light or maybe hard light and just nudge it down so that when we move it, we'll be able to visually see it moving, but it's not completely obscuring things. And you can use different gradient types. And once you have your clipping mask set up, you can do it kind of however you want. So I could add more gradients to this with the clipping mask in there and have it be, you know, maybe there's a little coming in on the sides like this. So yeah, you can do that. Now there's a little extra static just to give the image a little more fuzziness around the edges. And then light source. So this is an old technique that I picked up a long time ago, which is you create a new layer, you fill it with black, and then I like to set it to like 22% opacity so I can see underneath it. I take a white pencil or brush at about 3 pixels, so it's just a little dot, and I'm going to use this to mark where I want my light source to be. And I'm just going to have this W be my light source. So I just drew through the W, and I'm going to bring this back up to 100% so you can see it's just a black. All right, so that's where I want my light source to be. So I'm going to then go to my filters. I'm going to render a lens flare, and this tiny little screen here is showing me a preview of the image, and you can see there's this little white dot right there, and that's the dot that I drew. So I am just going to click that dot, put the lens flare right over it, and then you have your option of what your lens flare wants to look like. So there's these red ones and kind of this cool white one, and then this one with these kind of straight lines. And you can set the brightness or darkness. So I'm going to make a bright lens flare. Boom. And look at how bright that is. That's beautiful. And then you can set it to soft light. And look at that. The difference between nothing and soft light is an image that just has a little bit more pull towards this. And you can also, you know, nudge it down so it's not as dramatic. So maybe I want it to be like 60%. And there you have it. So I have my image. I've put some static in it. I have all these layers over here. How do I make it move? Well, that part is all happening here. So under this window, you can go to timeline, and that pulls up this bar down here. And in this bar, there's your timeline, and this lets you create a new spot on your timeline. Now, I like to just do 8 frames. Each one of this is a frame of animation. I like to do 8 frames. I'm actually going to delete these because I like to have the time set. So to set the timing of the frame, you go to Other. And I like to do right in 0.0. And then you can play with what range you like. I usually default to 0.06. If you want it to be a little faster or smoother, you can put it to 0.5, 4, I think even 3. When you get faster than that, in my experience, it gets a little bit too fast and it might skip frames. And if you get slower, you really see the movement almost a little bit too chunky. So this is the sweet spot for me, is between like 0.5 and 0.7, 0.05 and 0.07. So 0.06 is a good place to start. If you're not sure, just do 0.06. And then when the timing is set, you can nudge it up. Now you've got some options here. This just means it'll loop forever. These just move you back and forward. I don't know what this does. If you press this, it'll just play through your slides. Now, I've noticed that this option to play through doesn't quite play it at the frame rate. So this preview, which doesn't look like anything now because I haven't actually moved anything in between the frames, this preview is slower than it'll look. So especially if you're working at like 0.04 or 0.03, your preview is going to be way off from how fast it is. And sometimes it can come off, looking a little wild. So just keep that in mind. Your final product might actually be a different speed than this preview. So this frame 1 right here, perfect. We don't need to change anything. The first thing I like to do is go frame by frame. Now, frame 1 does this thing where any change I make on frame 1 will change everything down the list, but any change I make in frame 2 is going to stay in frame 2 within reason. If I change the content of a layer, if I draw a line, if I squish it, if I stretch it, that will change in all the layers. But if I move something, if I just take my static layer and I just drag it over, it will be different between these two frames. And so the very first thing I like to do is just go frame by frame and drag my static around so that it's not ever in the same place twice. And that's going to create that staticky look that looks oh so good in your image. So sometimes just taking it all the way to the edges. And then if you don't want to accidentally have any possibility of having the same static frame, you can take the static image and you can make it like 7,000 by 7,000. I mean, the world is your oyster here. I just did the size I did for demonstration purposes. But now we've given every frame its own position of static, and if I hit play, you'll see it's moving. And again, it is catching a little bit, like some of the frames are kind of staggering, but I'm getting the impression of what it looks like. So now we're going to go back to frame 2, and this is how I animate. So what I do is on every frame, I just move something a little bit one direction, and I like to create circles. So what I'll do is on this text, my kind of centerpiece text here, you can see if I press my arrow keys, it'll move left or up or down. I'm going to just move this left, and then I'm going to move it left and up. And then I'm going to go to the next frame and I'm just going to move it up. And then here, it's got to be nothing. And then 6, I'm going to move it right. And then I'm going to move it right down. And then I'm going to move it down. And what that's going to do is kind of create like a figure 8 shape here. And I think my computer's just a little slow because I'm recording it right now. But you can see what it's supposed to look like. And what you can do is you can kind of exaggerate on your centerpiece to give it a little more oomph. So maybe I push it 2 in every direction. So instead of just being left, left, up, it's left, 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 up, 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 2 in every direction. And that's going to make it more dramatic as it wiggles around. So everything else in the image is now going to kind of mirror that. And if I can mirror it in a layered way, what I mean by that is, so I'm going to go to, I'm going to try and find a layer that has some real movement to it when I move it. So maybe maybe just the background layer in general. So I'm going to mirror this movement with the left up, up, right, right down. And I'm only going to go 1 in that direction. And because this one is going 2 in that direction and this one's going 1 in that direction, it's going to give it this nice illusion of depth because it looks like this is moving more and this is moving less. Kind of like if you look at things passing in the distance, if you're on a road trip, you look out the window, stop signs and trees are going by really fast, but the clouds and mountains are going by really slow in the background. Kind of that same visual principle. And then, just on all the other layers that are a little less consequential, you can just kind of move it however you want. So this layer, it looks like as I'm moving it, it's kind of, as I'm aligning it, it's dimming things. So here we can kind of see that it kind of dimmed everything out when I made it align with the layer beneath it. And for this one, you can also do kind of like counter movements or off movements. So I did left, up as my first circle, but I could actually do up, right, and then down, left, and that'll kind of create a counter movement in there. And some of these layers are so subtle that you're not going to notice much of a change, but sometimes you just do the things just for you. So I've got my teacher layer here. I'm going to do left, and then I'm going to go left, and then I'm going to go right. And that's going to create like a swaying back and forth look. So, this is an oceanic scene, so maybe I'm imitating the waves by making it kind of go back and forth, or, whatever. So then I'm going to do the same on that really subtle layer that was right over it. And then I don't know if I want to move this one too much because it is kind of making the border get a little funky. So I might just leave this one as is. Sometimes you don't need to move a layer. Sometimes a layer staying in place can be a good thing. But this last text box here, I haven't moved, so I'm going to just experiment with this one. Now, I could maybe do something like make it move slow, so go to like 3 and 4 and move it up left, and then go to 7 and 8 and move it down right. And it's going to move kind of slowly off rhythm. Yeah, you know what? This created a nice little effect. So, this image, it might not be my magnum opus, but it is ostensibly what I do. I make layers, I screw with the layer blending types, I add filters, I may draw things in, I may drop a bunch of images. Sometimes if I'm being like kind of, working through something, like you can just literally like, today I was sad. You can journal in this thing. And if you don't want to like show anyone your feelings, like there's this option when you use text, you can rasterize and it'll turn it into an image. I can just pop this over and watch. I'm just going to make it a mosaic at like size 5. And look, there's this weird smudge in here now, and I can play with the weird smudge, and no one has to know what it says, and maybe I feel better because I worked out that feeling. And I can even put it at like movement 3, so it's even a higher up layer. I am going to delete that because I don't actually want it in this image, but that's an option. So yeah, I don't know. Sometimes you can just put little secrets in your art. That's kind of the fun of collages. You can put anything you want in here. So when you're done, what you're going to do to make it a GIF, well, one, you can save it as a PSD in case you ever want to go into it again and look at the layers. Because once you save it as a GIF, it's just going to collapse down into just these frames, it's no longer going to have the layer fidelity. So if you want to still have the layers, in case you ever want to add on to it or make any changes, you can save it as a PSD first. So I'm just going to call this tutorial, and I just hit OK there. And then to make a GIF, and if you're watching this, well, thank you. And if you know a better way of doing this, I am all ears, because this is how I've always done it. I go to Save for Web under File, and this is what my GIF will look like. There's a couple options in here. I'm at the point where I just pull it up and I hit save. But you can mess around with this if you want. And if you want to see the preview of the GIF as the speed it will actually play as, because I mentioned the frames in Photoshop will go a little slower once you get to these faster speeds. If you just press the play button on this Save for Web, it's going to show you what it looks like in here. I've never really messed with any of these. Like, seriously, I don't know what these do. I just hit save. GIFs can only be saved with 256 colors, so sometimes it will compress the colors down or like crunch them down a little bit and crunch your image. That's partially why I use static and stuff, to already make it look a little crunchy, so it doesn't look that different. But you can change how the colors are selected for your image. So yeah, you could make it look really, really crunchy if you wanted to. So I'm just going to hit adaptive, and then yeah, there's different ways of patterning. So you can have no dither, diffusion, pattern, noise. Again, I just use the defaults because they seem to work really well, but I'd be really interested in hearing what other people think. It'll also show you the file size. GIFs tend to run pretty large, so yeah, keep that in mind. Some websites have a maximum size limit for what size image you can upload. Tumblr's really nice about being able to upload images this big. But yeah, it's just something to keep in mind. That's displayed here. And then you just click save, and oh look, it's the creature. It'll just save it. You can just choose the file name. So I'm going to call this tutorial and hit save, and I have a GIF. So I'm going to go upload it and finish up this video. And thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about this process, leave them in the comments or shoot me a message. And hopefully you learned something, and hopefully you make some collage. And if you do, let me see it. All right. Thanks. Bye.